tell, do you see the road? I'm out to my soul into the sides whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect. Do it.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 6th part of, What If BEN10 Meets Powerpuff Girls? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of man of cartoons on fanfictionnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. For the time the Fire Nation Navy was staying, the men set up a small refugee camp. There, the officials brought in medics from other parts of the Fire Nation while also being able to stabilize the situation. The circumstance of the incident was still sketchy and odd for the many people involved, but that was not to say there weren't any surprises. Of course, this surprise came in the form of an unexpected visitor from another world. This person was perhaps the strangest Aang and his friends ever encountered. There wasn't anything wrong within a personality sense. Rather, the feeling towards him was due to who he claimed to be and what he can actually do. So it was no surprise that at the present the feeling was shared as everyone sat at a long table with Admiral Kazuki there. The design of the table was simple. It was long in length and short in width and the respective individuals at places of their own choice. The Avatar sat in the middle, with Katara at his left and Sokka at his right while the Admiral sat at the end of the table while looking at their new guest. Team Avatar had always met the strangest things ever. They met spirits with unbelievable powers and made new discoveries over the time they've known each other. But the person who sat at the other side of the table sounded completely different to what they knew. It was obvious by his height and appearance that he was teen likely at Aang's age. But the rest about him, such as his clothing differing from what they've ever seen, was totally odd to them. So far, some word of the circumstance had been enlightened to the Avatar trio and the Admiral. It turned out, according to the boy, that the creature that attacked the island was an alien called Nefarious, who has been going to different worlds or what he called parts of the multiverse in a campaign to have ultimate power similar to that of a god. It was somewhat hard to believe, but no one said anything as they listened to the boy until he was done. Hence, once that was done, the first to speak was the Admiral, who sighed and rested his elbows on the table with his arms held close by the fingers up to his face. So Ben-Tennyson, I must say this is hard to swallow. The Admiral said with a complex expression. Yeah, I agree. Sokka agreed. His voice, however, more bold than the Admiral as he seemed very unconvinced by Ben's words in the few minutes they spent for obvious reasons. So it was no surprise that he fired a small glare at the boy and said, so we're supposed to believe this thing called a watch. Omnitrix. The boy corrected. Right. Sokka replied with a sarcastic tone. This Omni, whatever, is able to turn you into these things called aliens. And then for some bizarre reason, there are other worlds than our own. Yup. Ben nodded with a childish grin. Sokka groaned in response to it. He couldn't take the boy seriously, especially with how he reacted. In fact, it was immediately after that his glare became more directed at the boy. Okay. But do you really think we look stupid? Sokka retorted. I mean, sure there's the spirit world, but if you think for a second that we'll believe this then you have got to. By this point, Sokka had his own shots against the boy. But before he could finish it, a flash of green light obscured his vision and the others in an instant. From the looks of it, the light came from Ben, whose unexpected action caused everyone to momentarily shield their eyes until the light died down. Once that happened, their hands were put down just in time to see a strange animal in Ben's place. The creature sat like a human and possessed some features of one. But the important thing Aang and the others noticed was the fact that it was a giant turtle. It had green skin all over noticeable parts of his body and had 3 huge fingers and legs similar to that of the normal creature. The next thing after that was a long black strap that went over its chest-covered shell and held a sword by the back of it and a green bandana around his eyes. Then lastly, another thing that caught their attention was a green and black hourglass on the middle of the shell chest. Shell force. The creature bellowed. The creature form was completely unexpected by everyone in that room. It not only proved Ben's claim, but it stood from the chair the boy had previously been on and slammed its hand on the table with a grin on its face. "You were saying, dude," he said. Sokka didn't know what to say in response. He tried to find the right words, though, but ended up only stuttering while raising a finger at the turtle humanoid. But his expression, however, didn't make him alone as he continuously stared at the creature. As it turned out, even Admiral Kazuki and Katara were in the same possession. As for Aang, the teen seemed mildly surprised and a bit fascinated at the creature's appearance before a smug then dawned on his face. He had his reason for it and as such turned to Sokka and said, "I told you so." There was no doubt that Team Avatar had seen some weird things in their adventures. But to see and witness an ordinary boy from a different world turn into something completely different was indeed something entirely new. Fortunately, Aang didn't seem affected about it since he saw the previous transformation from his first encounter with the boy. Hence, since he was unfazed by it, he turned back to Ben with a less smug look on his face and more of confidence. "Anyway, I believe you," the Avatar said to him. "We've seen weird and crazy things that don't make much sense, so you're not the first to make less sense." Thanks I guess," Shell Force said, though unsure on how to feel. The situation seemed to be light now. Ben's strange and sudden form was still a surprise that startled everyone aside from Aang. The Avatar noticed it without looking at his girlfriend or the Admiral, but for the latter decided to. He turned to him and asked, "So, Admiral, is there anything else you have to say?" What?" the Admiral muttered, his face clearing, showing his absent-mindedness. It was a bit to grasp the situation, but the Admiral was able to accept it. He knew instantly how he may look before everyone and as such made a fake cough before looking straight at everyone again. His eyes, though, were at the boy, who he then motioned his hand to with calmness coming from his. "Ben-10, he called out. "Your words are truly shocking. But might I ask that you change back?" "Sure," Shell Force concluded. So with that, the change happened again. The humanoid creature before everyone became engulfed in a flash of green light after it had touched the hourglass on its chest, which their minds knew was the Omnitrix. Hence, once that happened, the turtle was gone and in its place was the teenage boy with brown hair again. So to see the change again, it was again a surprise. Admiral Kazuki could think on how such a process should be impossible, but held back any surprise or thoughtful expression from him by a nod. "Thank you," he said pleasantly. "With that out of the way, I believe we can get on track with things." Yes, I agree," Katara said in agreement. She had too been sucked mentally by the transformation twice. But upon hearing the Admiral's words, she was able to snap out of it with a firm mind. Now, at the present, it was agreed there for things to move. Ben understood this despite the way he acted while his attention was both on the Admiral and Team Avatar. The reason he agreed to being with these people was because of Aang, who he had explained a bit of himself, asked him to explain to his friends and the Admiral. But of course he was against it at first until Aang was able to persuade him on it. Once that happened, the start of the meeting and everything that happened led to what had now occurred. "So, Ben-10, you say you're from another world," said the Admiral. "How is it like?" "I have heard of the spirit world and even then I've read it is a place very different from our own." "You have no idea," Aang muttered to himself. Ben snickered at the response. He didn't know why he should, besides the fact that he could only imagine what Aang must have gone through in this other world. However, his reaction caught the attention of others, whose looks made him stifle before them. Sorry. I couldn't help myself," he apologized. "Don't worry about that, Ben," Aang assured. He looked less bothered and more appreciated about Ben, especially by the glee in his eyes and a tone at Ben that he was interested in what the boy had to say. "So can you tell us Aang asked enthusiastically. About your world, that is. Yeah, sure. Ben replied. He crossed his arms over his chest and looked around him with a thoughtful look on him. Well, for one thing, it's way forward in time than your world. He began to say. In my world, we're technologically advanced than what I've seen. We got things that can fly in the air, sea and air really fast. And then there's TV, video games and well, the internet. The internet? Katara questioned. Video games? Aang questioned. TV? Sokka questioned. Look, we got things that can go really fast on air, sea and land. Okay. Does yours break the sound barrier? Ben asked. His tone, however, sounded rhetorical. Sokka became confused. The what now? I rest my case. Ben said and lay back on his chair with a smug. It became apparent now to everyone else that Ben was having his fun over them. However, none of them seemed to bring this up, especially as the Admiral spoke again. Impressive. He said. Most impressive. The man sounded very intrigued. To think there are more worlds than our own that are very different is very hard and amazing to grasp. I can't hold back any more that I believe you, Ben Tennyson. Thanks. Ben smiled. But you can just call me. Wait, hold up. Sokka interrupted. He had his hands up in the air to motion his objection as well as an objective look on his face. I'm sorry, Admiral, but should we believe him? He asked strongly. I mean, come on, for all we know he could be working with this nefarious guy. Sokka. Aang scowled offended. What? I'm just trying to avoid a Zuko moment. It was no rocket science to his friends that Sokka was a man of facts. It was why he doubted Ben's abilities before he changed into an alien before them. However, even though his intention had been good, it sparked an argument between him and Aang, which in turn made them turn their attention from Ben, who now had his head down. Meanwhile, from her place of sit, Katara could only glare and scowl at her boyfriend and brother to stop. Their voices were becoming loud with each passing second while the Admiral sat quietly and watched the bickering. He too wanted to intervene and get things calm again, but soon found he wouldn't, especially as Katara noticed something odd coming from Ben. Over the year, Sokka had said some dumb things without thinking it. He had earned a hit or sarcastic retort from his friends, learning from them over time. But even then, his accusation seemed to have hit Ben so hard that he was looking down at his knees with his fists tightened on it, bottling his anger in him. He, however, was unaware of a pink aura coming around or the calls by Katara and the Admiral to him. Suddenly, without warning, Ben shot his face directly at Sokka's direction with his eyes now glowing pink as his voice echoed. Don't you dare put me with that monster! He yelled in anger. Suddenly, in an act unexpected and not seen, Ben's body shot out pink energy around him. It hit the Avatar trio and Admiral Kazuki and almost forced them off their feet while shaking the ground like a small tremor. Fortunately, no harm was done to anyone in the tent, although the experience could not be said about Ben. So as a result of the energy blast, Ben's body felt weakened. It was obvious by the panting coming from the teen as well as the confused look on his face as he stared at his knees once again. He felt confused and surprised at what just happened, as well as the feeling uncertainty growing in his mind. His mind tried to grasp what just happened, but it didn't at the time. Instead, this led him to look back at the Avatar trio apologetically. I'm sorry. Was that me, really me? Sokka opened his mouth to answer the question. He was still a bit dazed from the small blast but nonetheless able to speak. However, his intention was blocked as Aang slapped his mouth shut with his hand. Nope, nothing at all. Aang answered, though in a rush. Ben was a bit confused by his action. He had his eyes staring at the boy, ready to ask him about Sokka, when a thought suddenly came to mind. The thought came like a flash, with an image of a boy at the age of 16 coming into view. Ben knew this teen very well, especially since he last saw him in the previous universe. Flashback. Ben Tennyson was in his ultimate form as he walked out from a door. It had only been a second since he entered the mind of Rex Salazar, who had been sent into a coma by Nefarious. According to the evil creature, the coma was slowly taking away Rex's life, much to the fear of those who cared for the boy. But in the exchange for trying to save him, Nefarious got what he needed from the boy and went to another world. Now, presently, Ben examined his surroundings for any sign of Rex. He hadn't expected much from this other than to follow his instinct, hurry things up and get back to chasing Nefarious. However, his surroundings confused him very much. From the looks of it, Ben was in a white painted hallway. The walls were well structured with doors across each other while seeming to lead somewhere that he didn't know of. He could use any of his aliens that could alter the mind, but tried not to think of it. However, that was not to say that he didn't notice a little boy running into a door by the left. "Hey, wait," shouted Ben. However, his words were ignored by the boy, who just into the next door. Ben had not been given the chance to see the boy's face, so he couldn't determine if he was part of Rex's mind. But even if he wasn't, Ben gave chase to the boy, curious on whom or what he was. As such, he opened the same door the boy had gone through and ran inside, with the door closing behind him. However, once he did that, the door across that one opened with the same boy running out with a small laugh. Ben followed him suit by coming out of the same door and stretched his hand to catch him, only to then fail as the boy went down the hallway and entered another door. However, this time, Ben was right behind him before the door. Closed them. So far, in the moment Ben had started out, his chase was a simple one. He went after the boy in normal speed without thinking of using any of his alien's powers. But once the chase became really random, it became stressful for the hero as the boy would always elude him. From there, the chase became random as Ben and the boy ran into one door and emerged from another. Sometimes, Ben would find himself 2 doors away from the boy, who would then run to another door only for Ben to then run to that exact door. The entire scene felt like a comedic chase scene for the young Tennyson as he soon found the boy elusive to catch. Now that if he thought about it, maybe it was a comedic chase. The way he and the boy would run into and come out from different doors was too random to make sense. And just to make things weirder, a cow on 2 feet and a towel around its lower part ran out from one door, followed by a brown spotted dog running from a flying white ghost running from another door. The entire thing seemed to be such a surprise that even the boy froze and looked at them, with Ben, before running off with the latter chasing him. Suddenly, just when Ben thought it couldn't get weirder, it just did. He chased after the boy and emerged from another door only to come to a stop as he noticed the boy run down to another door. This time he tried to determine which place he would come out, but instead got a surprise when about 6 exact versions of him ran out and entered different doors across each other. "Alright. What the heck is going on here?" Ben cried out in mixed feelings. He felt overwhelmed by the randomness and as such couldn't take it anymore. In fact, he soon brought his hands close together and slapped them against each other. "Enough!" he shouted. Indeed, the entire thing was enough for him. Hence, once his hands made contact with each other, the entire scene around him collapsed. The white walls and the doors scattered into tiny pieces and then formed into a different place much larger. Once that happened, Ben found himself in a place occupied with different machinery either by the walls unhooked somewhere. The walls were still white, but with some black stripes that added a bit more to them. Now Ben could question where he was and the boy, but his focus was on neither on that. Instead, his eyes were on a large tank tube in the middle of the room. He also saw a few numbers of people standing around the tube dressed in lab coats and seemingly observing whatever was inside the tube. The tube itself was glowing some kind of yellow light which was too bright for Ben to see without altering his eyesight. However, even if he wanted to, he didn't think of it as he noticed how frozen everything was in time. "Wow, what happened here?" Ben asked to no one particular. The entire scene was still new to the young hero that he couldn't determine what it was. He decided then to draw closer and see what the state of things before concluding what to do. Hence, for this, he moved to one of the scientists and waved his hand at his face. But to his expectation, the man neither moved nor indicated any way of such. But before he could actually tap into his powers to find out, a young voice interrupted him. "Don't bother, they won't notice you." "They never did," said the voice. "Whoa. Huh." Ben was startled. The teen certainly hadn't expected someone to speak. However, since to it not being the scientist, his attention was taken to his back where he saw a young boy standing. There, he noticed by the white shirt and brown pants from before that the boy was the same one he saw before, although the face was something entirely unexpected to him. "Wow, you're Rex," Ben said in shock. "Yep, that's me. Glad to see you finally noticed, Ben," the boy replied, though sarcastically. Ben was taken aback by his tone. He didn't know what to make of it other than the disgust look that was on Rex's face. "Hey, what's the matter with you?" Ben asked, annoyed. "I'm here to save you. Now if you don't mind, take my hand so we can get out of here." "And why should I?" Rex asked, though like a demand. "If you hadn't noticed, oh wait you haven't, 6 is gone just like my parents." "Oh I'm sorry," Ben said and frowned. The annoyance he had for the boy instantly ceased as he became sympathetic and pointed back to the scientists, precisely at a man and woman standing close to each other. "So the man and woman are my parents," Rex answered. Then he pointed at the youngest of the group. "And the occasional annoyance over there is my brother." "Okay," Ben said and allowed his mind to take in that. He indeed felt sorry for Rex, but chose not to bring up the past. Instead he turned to him and spoke to him. "Look, I'm sorry you lost your parents and 6, but you have to come back," he insisted strongly. "You must have friends that love you." Rex sighed and crossed his arms over his chest. The tension he held then melted away as a sad look came on him. "I do, but what's the point?" he said in doubt. "I lost the Omega Nanite and 6 died. What's to say I don't lose them too if I go now? I just don't want to lose them." "Rex, but you should." Ben attempted again. At this point, Ben was running out of things to say. He knew how deep a death can be on a person but also knew he had to return the boy back or else he would die. However, things became complicated as footsteps could be heard from the back, followed by a snickering voice. "Oh really?" said a voice. The voice came unexpected like its footsteps as whoever it is drew closer. So while Rex snarled upon hearing it, Ben turned to his back to see the source of it. Then to his surprise, it turned out that one of the scientists had become unfrozen and was now heading to them. To the human eyes, the scientist looked normal. But to Rex, whose angry glare was more precise, he was clearly something more than that to him. The scientist wore a black coat on top of a black shirt and wore black trousers. His other looks like his hair was combed back, long enough that it passed the back of his neck, while possessing a malicious smile that Ben knew he didn't like. "Van Cleis!" Rex snarled angrily. Indeed, the man who stood before them was Van Cleis, Rex's archnemesis. But unlike his present form, the man was a younger version of himself. However, even then, the hint of evil in him was ever still present in and on him. "Now, Rex, is that how you should greet your elders?" Van Cleis asked with a grin. By now every part of Rex was telling him to attack the man before him. He hated him very much as the last they met was still fresh in his mind. But even if he could, Van Cleis took over the conversation as his hands were now behind his own. "Well, that is beside the point anyway," he stated with a shrug. "But you should know going back will only bring pain to those you care about." "Huh?" Rex responded. His anger had died down a bit instantly as a confused expression. "Yes, that it right," Van Cleis stated further. "Everything you do has only hurt those you care about. I told you, you never belonged with the humans, you belong with me, Rex." Never. Rex shouted angrily. He had his eyes glaring angrily at the man once more while his teeth were gritted. I'll rather die than to join you. Van Cleist chuckled. Then why don't you? He asked surprisingly. His offer was out of his own character but yet sounded like his evil self. As for Rex, this caught him off guard and even surprisingly made him calm. His silent and yet attentive response to Van Cleist's offer then made the villain's pride to grow as he continued. Think about it, Rex. He said in persuasion. The Nanite incident, the death of your parents, the EVOs, everything has been circled around you like asteroids pulled by a planet's gravity. If you truly wish for there to be peace, then let go. Join your parents and Agent 6. It is only then you will find peace. No, don't. Ben objected angrily. The teenage boy had stood back and watched everything. But now that his suspicion of the man was confirmed, he pushed him aside and went on one knee, facing Rex. Listen to me, Rex. That is not true. He insisted. Van Cleist laughed in response. Oh, and how would you know, Tennyson? He asked rhetorically with a mocking tone. You don't even know him. In fact, if I recall correctly, you fought him and left him for dead. No, I didn't. Ben turned and yelled angrily. His offense towards the man was very obvious now. However, even at that moment, he couldn't help but feel doubt as he looked down. Yes, it's true that I fought him but what? Van Cleist interjected. Besides, you are not one to talk. You have anger, you have fear, but you do not know how to use it. Suddenly, the room around them changed entirely. It happened so sudden that before Ben and Rex could contemplate what happened, the older boy gasped with mixed feelings on his face. It turned out as everything formed back again, their new location was a dreadful sight for even the kindest of hearts to see. So as Ben and Rex were on their feet, they saw dead bodies everywhere. These bodies were not ones Rex knew but the people Ben knew close to his heart. He could see the dead bodies of his friends and family all lined up to a huge gray mountain before them, while the sound of lightning flashing in the clouds could be heard. Also, with each time they flashed, Ben got a good look of his family and friends such as Gwen, Blossom, Juniper and few others. Ha 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 ha. Laughed a familiar voice. The voice came sudden and yet was so close. But whether it came from Van Cleist was a small mystery until both Ben and Rex turned to see Nefarious standing, with the former villain absent. He was in his ultimate form, composed of Rex's former blue armor, with his grin so wide and open his sharp teeth could be seen. Now do you understand, Tennyson? He laughed manically. There is nothing but death for all heroes. You monster! Ben shouted angrily. For long Ben had endured so much pain and suffering. He had seen his friends die, species been extinct and his family almost dead. But still, even if what he saw may not be true, the boy couldn't hold his emotions. In fact, holding them was never a thing that came to him at that moment, especially what happened next. Finally, Ben has had enough of Nefarious. His emotions began to get the better of him and so made his entire body to be covered in a pink aura. From there, the color began to glow so bright that Rex had to cover his face and step back. What's going on? The boy wondered. The scene before him was confusing and yet felt so intense. Rex had seen and experienced a lot in his life that it had felt like he could handle what life had for him. However now, even though this may not be exactly life, what he saw next made him gasp in shock and fear. The boy known as Ben Tennyson was gone and replaced by something else. He no longer stood in his ultimate form but rather as something entirely different. Rex didn't know if this form was one of the Omnitrix's aliens or one of those new aliens the alternate Ben had told him one time, but then again when he moved towards his left and found that the Omnitrix insignia was gone, he knew right away that something was indeed wrong. Ben, is that you? Rex asked. Ben didn't answer him. Instead it became very noticeable that the leak of power coming from Ben became so intense that Rex shuddered and took a step back. However, that didn't stop him from calling to the boy, who again ignored him entirely. Just then, with a loud roar, Ben's voice shook the entire ground. The mountain next close to them shuddered and broke apart in a matter of minutes while the ground shook violently like an earthquake. The boy's roar was so strong that even when Rex covered his ears, he screamed as he could still hear the sound beating against his eardrums like they would burst. Suddenly, the moment to attack came in that instant. Ben flew right against Nefarious and slashed his hand right through Nefarious' Amour's chest plate. Then, while the villain shouted in shock, he dug both hands into the large slash on the chest plate and tore the entire armor off in a swift move. Ah! Impossible! Nefarious shouted in shock. However, Ben was not done yet with him. In fact, his intention to destroy him led him to swiftly grab the monster's chin before flying off into the air in full speed. Then, before the supervillain could react, he twirled so fast in the air that from the ground it looked a spinning pink light was shining the skies before then coming a sudden stop and sending Nefarious all the way to the ground with full force. Meanwhile, Nefarious screamed in the short travel to the ground. He couldn't stop himself or find a way to get out of the impending collision which could be devastating on him. As such, when he hit the ground, the impact tore through the ground and trees close by with Rex being flown off his feet into the air. It almost seemed for Rex that he wouldn't last in this situation, but fortunately he landed on the ground with a loud groan on his side. "Man, what's going on?" Rex asked to no particular. He couldn't fully understand Ben's state or how everything led to it. But he was able to get back on his feet and hold his side while wincing from the pain. "Ben, you have a lot to explain," he muttered. "But right now I have to stop you somehow." Indeed, the teen had to do something about the situation. He didn't think of the pain in his back or side or how he was going to do it. Instead, he just got himself to run with every intention to bring some sense to Ben. But before he could even get close to the crash site, he came to a complete stop as he noticed a pink-shaped ball heading towards the exact place. In closer look, it was revealed to be Ben, heading feet down with full gravity force. "Ah man, this isn't going to be good," Rex muttered with mixed feeling. It turned out Rex was more right than he thought. The collision by Ben against the crash site sent such a shockwave that it was twice than what it was before. This time, however, Rex could see the wave of rocks heading towards him before shielding his face as he was sent flying away. From there, his body tumbled violently until he came to a stop some miles away from the crash site with his clothes having scratches everywhere. I see I can't do this," Rex muttered with a weak tone. His body had previously been able to stand despite the strain on him, done by his own free will and determination to set things right. Unfortunately, with his body lying defeated on the ground, he felt doubt. Besides, why should I help him? He isn't the guy I know, he isn't the Ben I know. He thought to himself. Maybe Van Cleis was right. Rex muttered in total defeat. Maybe I should just give up. Humph, Van Cleis being right. "I never thought I would hear those words from you," Rex said, a familiar voice. "Huh?" Rex muttered. The voice sounded very familiar, maybe too familiar. But even when he heard it he recognized it and shook his head before slowly opened his eyes. "No, it can't be you. You died." He muttered. "Does that matter now, Rex?" questioned the voice. I don't know," Rex said. The voice sighed deeply. Its reaction could only be imagined until Rex fully opened his eyes just in time to see Six standing before him with his usual scowl on his face. "Stand up, Rex. That's an order," the figure before him shouted. "C6. Rex muttered. The sight of Six was truly something to behold. He still looked the same as he did before the encounter with Nefarious and spoke to him like usual. But then, even if he wasn't real, Rex fought the pain all over his body and stood full up. Six nodded with a firm nod in response. "Very good, Rex," Six said. "Ever since we met, you have been indisciplined, reckless and at sometimes stubborn." "Ouch, seriously, Six." Rex groaned. I'm not done. Six stated bluntly. But over those years you possessed something that I never thought I would admire. Love, dedication, and the willpower to protect those you care about and don't even know. And even despite Providence first seeing you as a weapon, you still did the right thing. So ignore what Van Cleise say and keep the good fight. I wish you the best of luck. Thanks, Six. Rex said and smiled. But is that really you? That, Six smiled pleasantly, is up to you to decide, Rex. The figure that was Six was certainly someone uncertain to determine. But then even if he was or wasn't the real one, Rex couldn't help but feel happy seeing his mentor for the last time, especially as he watched him disappear into twinkling light. He still deeply missed him very much, but this time felt strong with himself once again. Now then, I better make you proud, Six. Rex stated determinedly. I just need to figure out how to reach Ben in time. Even from the very skies, the hole in the earth looked massive. It had only been a minute since Ben went all out on Nefarious with no sign of mercy. In fact, even at that very second the boy could be seen on Nefarious's body punching swiftly at the monster's face. At that time, his accuracy and force made the supervillain unable to move while at the same time creating a small hole behind his head. Throughout the time there, the amount of punches Ben gave was uncertain. He had displayed thrice the speed of XLR-8 and as such had the advantage over Nefarious. However, to make things worse for the villain, he came to stop and grabbed hold of Nefarious's forehead. Then with a tight squeeze on it, he drained the entire life force of all the fairies and ghosts and any other power Nefarious had before throwing against the wall of the crater they were in. There, a loud thud could then be heard from the distance and soon enough Nefarious could be seen back in his normal form, wearing just a black cloak. Now finally the end seemed near for the supervillain. He has been beaten to the point that he had no power left to even defend himself. So to say he was in Ben's mercy was very true but surprisingly wrong at the same. The reason for the latter was due to the grin on Nefarious's face despite being stuck on the wall, weak and possibly close to death's door. At this point, every part of Nefarious hurt him to move from his place. His arms were spread apart while the size of his own body was shaped on the wall. So it should be logical that he see his end and so hate it very much. However, for some reason, he just chuckled until it grew into a full laugh. Good. Good. He grinned widely with a cooed tone. Ha 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 ha. You have done well, Ben Tennyson. Ben said nothing to him in response. It was clear, though, by his pink eye glaring at him that he still had the boy's attention. However, if that wasn't assuring enough, the fact that his left hand then turned into a pink blade showed it. Nefarious cooed again. Yes, I can feel your anger. Strike me down with all of your hatred and your journey to the dark side will be complete. Ben growled in response after the supervillain spoke. It was not certain if it was towards what he said or the way he spoke. But it was certain by the way he floated over to Nefarious that he planned to end him once and for all. In fact, his sword hand was just about raised to the man's head when suddenly a voice called out to Ben. No, Ben. Don't do it. Ben stopped on the mention of his name. The look on his face showed a bit of confusion before he turned to his back and saw Rex standing there. At this point, the boy stood boldly before him, still with tattered clothing, with a bold look on his face. You're better than this. Do not give in to your anger. He said with persistence. I don't know if you're really listening, but I'm just going to say it. What you're doing is not the way a hero should it. Yes, I don't know you like the other Ben I knew. But I understand now that what you feel, what you've carried on is the pain. Rex's voice began to crack. Maybe we're not so different. I've lost my parents, some have passed and someone I know. Trust me, I know the bitterness and the feeling to take a life. But I also know one thing. He smiled at the new thought. I remember my friends and the new family I made in Providence. And you know what? The fact that I can always go to them with a smile and have fun helps me to overcome the inner pain and suffering. Right now the situation seemed to be Rex's last chance. He spoke from his heart and made sure to be honest to himself more than ever. Fortunately, even then, he noticed that he was reaching to Ben as his sword hand returned back to normal. It was a good assurance that his effort wasn't for nothing and as such made him smile the more. "So what do you say?" he asked visibly. "Let us overcome this together and accept it to be a better person. I have and I know that even you must have some people waiting for you." "While waiting for me?" Ben thought and blinked. His mind had been clouded by hate and anger that he never realized it until that moment. Fortunately, with this new revelation, his eyes continuously blinked as memories flood into his mind. "Gwen, Grandpa, Mum, Dad, Danny, Blossom, Buttercup, Bubbles, they're waiting for me," he thought in full realization. Just then, right at that second, other people came in mind. The memory of them came like a truck colliding with another one, causing tears to flow out of his pink eyes. The Fentons, Timmy, Cosmo, Wanda, Poof, Sparky, what have I done? What have I become? At this point, the clarity continued in Ben's mind as he continuously floated there. He could feel regret and sorrow take over his anger and hate, causing his body to slowly return. Then, with the last bit of his strange pink form gone, he fell to the ground on his knees and began to cry. "I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry," he cried out continuously. Ever since Ben failed to stop Nefarious from killing his friends, he has been carrying the weight of death on him. He had blamed himself entirely on it and as such has always been intended to kill the guy in a fit similar to desperation. However, now, there he kneeled, crying his eyes out as he finally acknowledged their death and let out the pain in him come out made him feel different. He continued this for a short while until knelt in front of him and hugged him with a pat on his back. "Hey, it's going to be okay. I promise," he said with assurance. Ben paused for a moment and nodded in response. He formed a small smile on his face before returning the hug back. From there, the hug there was then broken off with Rex standing up and raising his hand at the team. "You know, this has been fun and all, but I'll like to return to my life now," he said with a smile. Ben nodded in response. "Sure." Both boys had gone through their grief and now felt better than before. But before Ben could grab the other boy's hand, a long robotic golden hand hit him at the side, sending him across the crater and hitting its wall. "Ugh!" Ben cried out in pain. "Ben!" Rex shouted in shock. The change of event was indeed a shock to the two boys. Rex and Ben were so close to leaving when something unexpected happened and changed what had happened. Hence, when Rex turned to his back, he saw Van Cleis standing with his golden robot hand being the thing holding Ben against the wall. Nefarious was out of sight from the self-shaped hole in the wall while Van Cleis stood to take care of the hero. "Ah, what a happy ending, isn't it?" Van Cleis said in his creepy grin. "Too bad it all ends here with you dead, Tennyson." Just then, upon saying those words, Van Cleis tightened his grip on Ben. It caused the boy to wince in unbearable pain, screaming as the man sent lots of electric jolts into Ben, causing the boy to cry out in pain. The boy tried to struggle his body out of the robotic grip but found it impossible to do so, especially as he found it impossible to call out his alien powers despite being in his ultimate form. So while that was happening, Rex was frozen in a moment of shock. His mind had to contemplate what just happened before an angry look dawned on his face as he glared at Van Cleis. "Let him go, Van Cleis," he snarled angrily. Van Cleis didn't respond to him. Instead, he laughed as he continued to send more jolts into Ben. The sight was indeed painful to look at and as such made Rex to take a step forward. But before he could advance any further, a pair of hands wrapped softly around his neck. "Oh my son, we missed you so much," said a woman's soft voice. Mum," Rex said in fully realization. He was taken by surprise by the touch and not long felt someone softly ruffle his hair in a playful manner. "You were always an energetic boy," said a man. "Dad?" Rex muttered. Rex didn't know why, but he could recognize their voices clearly. They sounded so nice and welcoming that his mind overtook him to look back at his supposed parents. As expected, the man looked like an older Rex with a mustache and lab coat while the woman wore glasses, had long black hair and wore a lab coat too. From the looks on their faces, both parents were glad to see their little boy standing before them. The same could be said about Rex, who let them hold his hands while feeling bewilderment and joy. I can't believe it. You're alive," he said. "We are, Rex," his mother said. "And we can be together again." "Yes, just come with us," the father stated. Rex nodded enthusiastically at his parents. The joy and happiness in him was very apparent on his face that he let them slowly pull him. But that all changed when a loud cry shouted, "Rex, PL please, BH." "Huh?" Rex responded confused. Suddenly, the true situation dawned on the boy. He looked back at the source of the voice and found Ben still being electrocuted by Van Kleis before turning to his parents and pulling his hands from them. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. But I won't be coming to you, not yet," he said to them. "Rex," the mother said, surprised. Rex took a deep breath and turned his back at them in response. He felt his heart is hurt at the cause of it, and so felt his parents disappear on that instant. But before then, the two adults smiled at their son, surprisingly being proud of their son's decision, which may imply they were more than his imagination. However, whether Rex knew about their reaction went unnoticed as they disappeared and he returned back to his 16-year-old self. "Now time to kick some Van Kleis butt," he stated with a determined voice. Now, Rex's mind had been made up and now he felt stronger than before. He could still see Van Kleis torturing Ben until finally he called out to him. "Yo, Van Kleis!" he shouted. Van Kleis stopped his torture and turned to Rex. His action had been done out of curiosity, which as a result led him to meet face first with a big robot hand. Once that happened, he was flung against a wall, releasing Ben from his grip instantly and causing him to fall the ground. "Hey, you okay?" Rex called out to Ben. Ben groaned in response as he slowly used his hands to help him up. He could still feel the pain all over him, but didn't let that stop him from giving a thumbs up at him. "Yeah, just good," he answered. Suddenly, Van Kleis emerged from the hole and charged at Rex. It was clear by the anger on his face that he had enough of the teenage boy and his meddling in his goals. However, that was not to say that when he shot his golden fist that Rex let him hit him and succeed. In fact, the teen grabbed it with his left smack hand before tightening his grip on it until the man's own broke. "Aw!" Van Kleis cried in pain. Up to this point, the supervillain always had the upper hand. But now Rex had the advantage against him, especially as he pulled him towards him with much force before sending a direct smack hand fist to his face. Once that happened, Van Kleis was sent scratching through the surface of the ground before coming to a stop. The blow hadn't come too hard, but it also implied that Rex wasn't serious about it as he casually walked over to him with both hands normal again. "You know, for long I held a lot against you, Kleis," he said with a bold voice. "But you know what? I can't be bothered about what you do. I don't know where the real you is or when he'll return. But trust me, when he comes back, I'll be more than ready for anything he has to throw at me. And even though I don't have the Omega Nanite with me anymore, I am still Rex Salazar and I am still the biggest hero there is." "Hey!" Ben shouted, clearly offended. Rex ignored him entirely with a smug on his face. He could then turn to the Van Kleis and saw him try to stand up only to then see him change his hand into the slam cannon. "Now, Van Kleis, how about I leave you with a bit of a present?" he smirked. "No!" Van Kleis shouted in objection. However, his word was not taken by Rex. The teen had already loaded up a rock from the ground before shooting it at the supervillain. From there, the rock went at a speed so fast that it hit Van Kleis entirely and strangely caused an explosion. Then their whole surroundings changed from what it was and back to how it first was, the hallway, with Ben and this time an ordinary-looking Rex standing before each other. "Whoa, what just happened?" Rex asked confused. His arm was back to normal at this point. Ben smirked and held his hand up at the guy. "We just happened," he said. Rex didn't know how to respond to that. But seeing the smirk on the boy's face was enough for him to grab his hand and nod. "Yeah, we're awesome," he said. "You bet." Ben agreed. Just then, both heroes found their entire surroundings engulfed by light. The mind had finally been cleared from Nefarious' influence and now was leading both boys out of the mind of Rex Salazar. Present time. Time felt slow as Ben reminisced the thoughts. He recalled what happened afterwards and so couldn't stop himself from smiling. He also knew then that what happened involving the pink blast was his fault and so didn't look so moody as he did prior to the memory. In fact, when he looked back at the Avatar trio, a goofy smile was on his face as he scratched the back of his head. "Oh, sorry about that." He apologized to everyone. "That seems to be happening a lot now. I guess I should learn to keep my temper down." No problem," Katara said in a form of assurance. The smile from the boy had come a bit unexpected considering how his reaction had been a few seconds ago. But still, even then, she knew there was more to it that the boy was letting on. However, unknown to the Water Tribe girl, she was right. Ben didn't know about that thought of hers, though, as his expression changed from the form to a straight one. It was clear to him then that what had happened had shaken the people, and as such led him to speak again. "Aang and friends, I understand you can't trust me entirely," he said honestly with a calm voice. "To be frank with you, I wouldn't trust a guy who randomly shows up with things I don't understand. But please, trust me when I say that I am no way in alliance with that monster, Nefarious. He made my friends and family to suffer, played games with me and those I care about and destroyed people that I know. I'll admit what I did now was not my intention. I've been through a lot that it was just some hours ago I was able to really get myself in line. And now that I am this way, I want your help, Avatar Aang, to end this maniac's path of destruction once and for all. If you choose not to, then fine, I will respect that, but please don't let those you love die the same way some of my friends did." The Avatar trio was quiet on their own. They each had heard the boy's words and contemplate all that they had been told before then exchanging looks of pity and remorse for the teenager. It was very to their eyes and ears that Ben had indeed gone through so much than they knew or could imagine and as such found within themselves that they couldn't blame him for his earlier reaction. As for the Admiral, he stayed still quiet with a mixed look of focus and empathy while looking at the now quiet teen. Over the time, Sokka had been a JRK when not intending to be. He had said things that would annoy others and end up paying the price for it. And now, once again, he sat there with a heavy heart as he stared at the table, not wanting to look at Ben in the eyes. He knew then that he had done something very wrong and as such couldn't shrug it off. "You went through so much, huh?" the Water Tribe boy said with sympathy. "I just didn't know." "I'm sorry." "He's right," Aang said with his own mind. But unlike his friend, his eyes were at the teen. "I'll admit, I didn't know if I could trust you fully. You kind of went into my mind without permission." Sorry about that." Ben apologized. Aang smiled in response. "But even then, I knew there was something about you that was good. I didn't know for sure, of course, which is partly why I brought you to my friends and the Admiral. I treasure my friends and Katara very much and I would be heartbroken if something bad happened to them. I've already felt loss before and I never want to face that. I'm just sorry you had to have such a weight like mine on you for so long." "Oh," Ben said, unsure on what to say. "Thanks I guess." The look on Ben's face showed uncertainty. He still had his eyes facing the trio and as such saw Aang stand to his feet with a look of approval on him. "Ben Tennyson, if you're ready to make things right and help me, then I'm with you. I promise," he said confidently. "Me too," Sokka said and stood up. He now had his eyes facing the teenager as he spoke. "I was a major JRK to you. I promise it won't happen again." I doubt it. Katara remarked and stood up as well. Besides, I can tell your heart is very much in the right place. And since Aang trusts you, then how can I say no? Ben didn't know what to say exactly now. The happiness in him was obvious on his face while he sat there and watched the Avatar trio's approval. It all seemed to be good until it got better when the Admiral stood up with a pleasant smile on his face. I believe you, Ben-10, he said. Thank the spirits you came here when we need someone. Thank you. Ben finally said. He could feel the tension in him die out on that very moment. It had only taken some honest words from him to convince the people to trust him, and now that he has that, he too stood up with a determined grin on his face. Now let's go save the world, he stated. Now from the looks of it, the present looked bright. Not only did the Avatar, the Water Tribe's siblings and Admiral Kazuki cheer him on, they were clearly in with him. As such, Ben felt free with what he had in mind and as such spoke with a fine voice. Nefarious is very dangerous, he said strongly. But throughout my travels I've noticed how he works. Is that so? The Admiral asked, intrigued. Yeah, and it's actually reasonable really. Ben added. Every time he enters a world, he seems to know the supervillains and the very state of that world before I do. I see. Sokka said with a thoughtful expression. So what you're saying is that he knows about this world already? Yup. Ben said. Aang got involved with the conversation. Well, if that is true, then how? The only explanation would be he has sources in that world. Maybe he gets them from these supervillains. Yeah, that has to be. Ben said in agreement. But even then he thought about it and became unsure for some reason. But it doesn't make any sense now, he said with an uncertain tone. When a guy I know named Dexter and I infiltrated his flying alien ship, we destroyed it and cut off his connection with most of those bad guys. So even when he made alliance with those guys, he certainly wouldn't be able to do so, especially in the former world I was in. He didn't know about the way that place was like since it was mainly an accident. Okay, so how did he know? Katara asked, confused. Maybe he became allied with someone there. No, there still wasn't enough time for that. Ben objected. Trust me, with the friends I've made, it took days to get their full trust. So for a supervillain it would be longer. I agree. Admiral Kowski stated right away. I've worked in diplomatic missions. One of the key aims is to make alliances and agreements, which I'm sure the Avatar and his friends would be aware. But even then, forming those relations takes patience and trust for that to happen. So with that, it's very clear that this monster found an alternate source where information on that world is fully available. Yes, like a library, Katara muttered with a new thought. She had spoke unexpected and as such got everyone's attention. However, whether she mined this was unknown as she spoke again, though this time louder. Like Wan Shirtong's library. Wan Shirhung? Ben asked, confused. Katara shook her head in response. No. Wan Shirtong library. Aang, I and the others encountered a huge library filled with so much knowledge. Yeah, Katara is right. Aang said in agreement. His eyes grew wide upon the revelation mostly because it came as a surprise to him. Back when we were in the Earth Kingdom during the war, we decided to go on a vacation. Sokka was against it because he thought we should be concerned with finding a way to beat the Fire Lord. But we didn't take it so much until we met Professor Zay from the Bei Sing Se University. He told us about the library and got Sokka's attention to have his own vacation at the library. When we found it we got what we wanted, but we angered the spirit, Wan Shirtong, and got chased out of the library before it got completely buried. That makes sense. Admiral Kazuki commented. I've read about this library from Zhao's previous works. According to his research, the library contains so much information than any library in the world. So it would make sense to go there to find out more about our world. I agree. Sokka said. But how are we going to get in? That bird didn't exactly like us. Yeah, thanks to you. Katara remarked. Sokka winced. Yeah, I can't argue against that. There was no doubt that part of the blame was on Sokka. The spirit, Wan Shirtong, had invited them with his trust and in the end got betrayed when they went against his word. However, the time to think on it was not on anyone's mind, especially as Ben took the next step. The boy decided then to raise the Omnitrix to his face before pressing the two sides, therefore letting a green hologram standing on top. Leave that to me, he said. By now, the look on Ben's face showed he intended to solve the solution. But to what it would be was not answered as the boy slammed his hand down on the watch's faceplate. Once that happened, he was momentarily engulfed in green light before standing in a new body. Dark Mare. Ben bellowed. Indeed, it was Dark Mare he had chosen. Aang could still remember it by just looking at it, though for what reason Ben had for it was unknown until he flew above the table, directly at Aang. I might be able to find this library you mentioned, the alien superhero stated. But I would need to look at it in your mind to get a feel of it. Do you mind? I'm not. Aang said with certainty in his voice. He had his eyes facing the alien for him before giving a nod at him. Please go ahead. Okay. Now just think of the place. I promise it won't take long. Okay. Aang nodded. There was no doubt in Aang's mind to not distrust Ben now. He had grown a fond to him which came as a means of comfort especially at that moment. As such, he felt so at ease that he closed his eyes and pictured the very building like Dark Mare instructed. Once that happened, the alien superhero extended his black glowing hands at the avatar, closed his own eyes to concentrate and entered his mind. Hold up, is that the Dark Mare questioned, surprised. The building was clear in his mind and looked similar to one that he had seen in pictures. But rather than focus on the similarity, he shook his head and ended the procedure before opening his eyes. All right, I got it, he said. That's good, Sokka said in response. The news was indeed good for the Avatar trio to hear. Aang opened his eyes immediately after and then watched with his friends as Dark Mare closed his eyes again. However, this time, he folded his legs in a similar meditation pose Aang usually adopt and became covered in black aura. From the clear looks of it, Aang knew from experience that the other teen was searching for the library's location and so motioned everyone to keep quiet. Fortunately, the meditation didn't take long as one would think. In fact, it only lasted about 2 minutes before Dark Mare unfolded his legs and landed on the ground behind Aang and the others with his eyes open. At this point, the trio had expectant look on their faces until they actually saw Dark Mare's expression which seemed to say otherwise. I can't find it in this world, Dark Mare stated with mild disappointment. I searched exactly like I saw the building but couldn't find any energy signature that points it out. What? Sokka asked, confused. It should be noted that in Aang's world, certain words were not understandable to them. The world they lived had little technology and as such was obvious why Sokka, a scientific enthusiastic, was confused. Fortunately, Aang seemed to understand it as he spoke. He's saying it's not in the desert anymore. Oh. So where is it then? Sokka asked. The spirit world. Dark Mare answered immediately. Are you sure you can do that? Sokka asked with a skeptic look on his face. It had only been a few minutes since Ben mentioned the location of Wan Shirtong's library. Since then, there hadn't been much to say until Ben said about opening a rift to the spirit world so they could get to the library, which sounded absurd to the Avatar trio and the Admiral. Yeah, I'm with Sokka on this, Katara said in agreement. To be sent into the spirit world by a spirit is one thing, but opening a way to it sounds impossible. Humph. Shows what you know, Ben stated with a smug. Currently, the young hero was back to his normal form from Dark Mare, having seen no use of the alien. Sure, Dark Mare came with more power than the Avatar and his people knew, but for now the hero didn't think he needed the form. And now that he was being doubted upon, he turned his back against them while having his arm above an already activated Omnitrix. Hold on, Ben. Aang reached out to the other teen. It's not that it isn't possible to cross to the human world. I can do that too. But you're not even from here. Are you sure you can do that? I can. Ben answered. At that moment, he turned his head sideways to the Avatar trio, revealing his smirk as his hand was ready to come down on the watch's faceplate. The alien device now had a green hologram of an alien, which as of the moment was unknown to the others. Relax. I got this. Ben assured. The Omnitrix specializes in making the impossible, possible. Just then, Ben slammed his right hand down on the Omnitrix faceplate, causing his whole body to be engulfed by a green light. The light lasted for a few seconds, before finally dying down to reveal Ben in yet another surprising form. The teen hero still retained a humanoid form as he stood proudly before everyone. His human feature was still retained such as with Dark Mare, but with some exceptions. These included his height now being 6 feet, as he now had a slightly pale face while wearing bizarre clothes and possessing a slightly muscular body and snow-white hair. So while the clothes he previously wore were strange, his present one which resembled some similarities to Dark Dan was stranger. The exclusion to this, though, was the parts where it was black was replaced with the color green and the Omnitrix symbol being on his chest. Ir Inferno. Ben shouted the name. As Ir Inferno, Ben possessed the powers of one of the most powerful ghosts from Danny Phantom's world. This meant that not only could he do the same things Danny and his alternate future self could do, it also meant he was possibly more powerful than the both of them. However, its use as of the moment wasn't for power level, but rather for something more complex, as soon revealed when Ir Inferno raised his hand. He made sure the ecto-energy in him flowed to his hand before opening a circular-shaped gateway in mid-air before him to the spirit world. What they could see, though, was just a misty forest. The place may seem at first to be an ordinary one, but by the odd way it looked physically and the coldness radiating from it said otherwise. In fact, if it weren't for all of this, questions about Ben's power would have come up again. Fortunately, that didn't happen at all. Instead, the first to speak was Katara, who was able to hold back her surprise as she spoke. So that's the spirit world? She asked. I'll admit I'm surprised you actually did that. But might I ask how long you've been doing this? Not sure. Ir Inferno said with a shrug. Now that he thought about it, he has been opening portals much that he never kept track. So while he put his fist by his right side, he turned to the others. Well, I've never used this alien ghost to open portals before, to be honest. I only know of this because of Ultimate Ben. Ultimate Ben? Sokka asked. Pfft, sounds like a lame name, ow. Sokka's reaction afterward was a result of Aang's nudge. Fortunately, the older one only glared at the Avatar before Ir Inferno answered his question. Yep, Ultimate Ben. Got a problem with that, ponytail? Great, another Toph. Sokka grumbled. Ir Inferno chuckled. He sounds like a great guy. I should meet him. Toph is a girl, Ben. Katara said. Sokka laughed. Amen. Toph is going to freak about this. Somewhere in the Earth Kingdom, Toph was practicing some earth-bending moves. She had just left her students an hour ago when she was by herself to this point and suddenly sneezed for no reason. The weather wasn't cold, so why did she sneeze? Man, I hope I'm not getting a cold. The earthbender muttered to herself. She could just think on it, but she chose not to as she shrugged her shoulders and went back to what she was doing. Ow! Would you quiet it? Sokka yelled angrily. Just a second ago, Aang had nudged at his friend by his side again. The reason behind it was due to Sokka's response earlier about Toph, who chose not to come with them when they last met her. Oops. Ir Inferno said sheepishly. It's okay. I'm sure she wouldn't mind much. Aang replied, though clearly uncertain. Right. Inferno muttered. He could see and tell that Aang was lying about it, but decided not to go into the matter anymore. Instead, he went on to change the subject. Anyway, Ultimate Ben is well me, but crazy stronger. He basically has all the power of my aliens into one form, and is able to do things you wouldn't imagine. I even had Nefarious on the run when I was in that form. Wow, really? Aang asked, a bit surprised and amazed. The look on his face then was very obvious as he continued. If that's true, then you can take him down on your own. Yes and no. Inferno shook his head. By the look on the Avatar trio, it was obvious the teen alien had confused them. As for Admiral Kazuki, he stood by his position and listened in on everything, especially as Inferno sighed with a deep thought obvious in mind. It's not that I can't use that form to beat Nefarious, it's just that I won't. Inferno confessed. I only made that form out of anger and spite for revenge. If I use that form any longer than required, it might tear me apart or drive me insane. I didn't consider the risk of adding all power into one body. I'm sorry. Why are you sorry? Aang asked. The expression he had earlier had existed for a short time before now hearing Ben's words. He understood then how Ben was feeling as so walked over to him before placing an assuring pat on his shoulder despite the height difference. Hey, don't worry about it. We'll beat Nefarious together. Aang said positively. Yeah, of course. Ben said and smiled. At this point, both heroes felt a good connection with each other. It was built on a foundation of trust before being followed by friendship. But before any of them could say anything, both turned to Katara as she called out to Aang, who soon received a shock of his own. For a reason yet unknown, Katara went over to Aang and embraced him in a hug. She had arms wrapped around his neck before pulling back a bit to kiss him on the lips. At first, Aang was surprised by her action until he realized her reason for it before closing his eyes and kissing her back. The two of them were at their moment for some time until finally departing lips, though with their eyes staring kindly at each other. Please come back safely, okay? Katara said. I will. I promise. Aang assured her. By the meantime, Sokka went over to Inferno's side with his arms crossed. His eyes were staring at the moment his sister and his friend were having before softly speaking to the alien hero without turning at him. Look at them. Kissing like we're not even here. He said. I know I'm her sister and all, but it's still weird to see my best friend kissing her, you know. No, not really. Inferno disagreed with a fine tone. But I think I get what you mean. I've seen couples kiss before and it can be disturbing even though I have a girlfriend. Wait, you have a girlfriend? Sokka asked in shock. The shock of the sudden revelation made the older teen to turn at Ben with a look on his face. How? You've been sounding sappy all this time. Sappy? Inferno asked. He had a raised eyebrow at the teen as he crossed his arms over his chest and continued, just because I've had rough times doesn't mean I live alone. I have friends like Aang, Katara and Toph. What about me? You haven't even met her. Sokka yelled, clearly offended. I know. But if she's able to annoy you, then I might as well do. Inferno chuckled. Sokka shot a glare at the alien in response. He had every thought in his mind to yell at the teen when he found that opportunity lost thanks to Katara. Apparently then, the Water Tribe girl had called Ben, who at that moment saw her facing him with Aang next to her. From the looks of it, though, she seemed slightly uneasy for some unknown reason, as it was then obvious when she spoke. Sorry if this seems too much, but can you watch out for Aang? She asked with a soft voice. Sure. Inferno said. He was a bit taken aback by her question for a second before putting up more of a bold front with his thumb up. Relax, Katara. I would have been watching him even if you didn't ask. See, Katara. Aang said to his girlfriend. He didn't seem at a rush at it as he faced his girlfriend entirely with a pleased and calming expression while speaking. I told you he would. He's trustworthy. I know. I'm just worried. Katara admitted. If what Ben said about Nefarious is true, then you might be facing something out of your boundaries. She was right about Aang with her feelings. Ben knew this since what he explained about Nefarious earlier was terrifying even to him despite living through the villain's evil ways. Good thing that Aang didn't tell her about the vision he had about the supervillain concerning what may become the future. Fortunately, Katara seemed to understand the situation despite her feeling. It was clear to everyone there as she took a step back and smiled at her boyfriend that she was fine. Good luck over there, Aang. I believe you. She said. Me too, buddy. Sokka said from his position. The older teen had a small smug on his face as he walked over to Aang and pat him on his back softly. So get back as soon as you can or else. Or else what? Aang asked. Sokka shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. I was building up to something. Katara did a facepalm, as well as with ear inferno due to Sokka. Though they didn't need to say it, it was clear they found the older teen's response to be dumb. It was a good thing that soon afterwards Admiral Kazuki went over to the group and said his goodbyes before cautioning about leaving the opening to the spirit world open for too long. Hence, with farewells said by Ear Inferno and Aang, both heroes went through the portal before it closed right behind them. Upon crossing over to the spirit world, Aang and Ear Inferno turned back to see the gateway gone. Well, there's no turning back now. Ear Inferno commented. Just then, the Omnitrix badge on the alien's face flashed its neon green color once. It didn't do any harm on the alien teen hero, though, as it then engulfed his entire body in almost an instant. As a result, when the light died down, Ear Inferno was back to being Ben again. Well, let's get going. Ben said again. The teen was back to facing the present. Concerning Nefarious. It was obvious by his almost serious face before walking away upon speaking, with Aang catching up to his side. From the looks of it, both teens were now marching through the weirdness of the spirit world like it was just an ordinary place on Earth without much of a hindrance. Wow, it's so spooky here, huh? Ben was the first to comment. It hadn't been long since the two heroes had ventured through the swamp-like spirit world with ease when Ben made a comment. So far, they were walking through a path as their feet marched on the small water bed, which oddly felt slightly different from the real deal. There were a few branches they came across, but none that they couldn't just walk over and continue. So now that Ben had made the comment, Aang looked at his friend strangely. He didn't know exactly what Ben meant, and as such questioned him. Spooky? Yeah. Spooky. Ben replied. Like really weird and kind of creepy. Oh yeah. Of course. Aang acknowledged. However, it didn't go well for Ben. This was obvious as he sighed and brushed his right hand through his brown hair before putting it back at his side. Aang was clearly not one for conversations, at least to what Ben thought until the Avatar looked at him again. This time, however, he asked a question. So, Ben, you have a girlfriend? Huh? Ben said, taken aback. He looked back at the Avatar a bit startled and asked. Wait, how did you know that? Katara and I heard you and Sokka. Aang said and chuckled a bit. So do you really have one? Yeah, I do. Ben admitted. He calmed down from the reaction he had before as a smile formed on his face when the image of the girl came into his mind. Her name is Danielle Fenton, but she mostly goes with Danny. He said. Cool name. Aang commented. Yeah, it is. Ben agreed. She's no pushover, though. She knows how to handle herself in a fight. Really? Yep. Ben nodded. You know that alien I turned into to open that gateway? Yes. Aang answered. You called him Ear Inferno. Yeah, well she can turn into its species. Ben explained. You see, that alien is actually what they call a ghost, and before you ask what ghosts are, they're kind of like creatures of the dead. Wow. So they're like spirits. Ben shrugged his shoulders. More or less, I guess. Honestly, it confuses me just to think about it. He said. So about Dani, she can turn into that since it's a part of her. That means she can kick Major, but if she wanted to. I should know, I fought her when she was turned evil by Nefarious's followers. Wow. She must be amazing then. Aang commented with odd smile. She is. Ben nodded in agreement. He felt really good to actually hear someone say that, as obvious by the wide smile on her face. She's sweet, kind, great at video games and a good kisser. Ben? Aang said. Yeah, what? Ben asked and turned to him. The Avatar then didn't know what to say as he held back a snicker. He could see a blush now on Ben's face at that moment as the teen apparently didn't know about it. But due to having gotten his attention, he covered his snickering lips and pointed at his face. You're blushing. He said. Huh? Ben said. Just then, the teen's mind registered what his friend just told him. It was embarrassing to think of, especially as he quickly slapped his cheeks before pointing accursedly at the Avatar. Not one word to the others, got it? Got it. Aang gulped and sheepishly smiled. Truth be told, it was really funny to see Ben's reaction. It proved that the teen hero was still a kid despite all the emotional things he went through because of Nefarious. Sadly, just when it seemed that was the case, Aang's smirk dropped when he noticed Ben come to a stop with his face down on the ground. Ben. Are you okay? Aang asked with concern. He had seen this act from Ben and knew it wasn't something good. Yeah, I guess. But what about her? Ben asked. His tone was depressing from the moment he spoke. Right now Dani is with Juniper and a friend of mine in another world to save it. But now that I think about it, when Dani comes back, she won't have a home to go back to. Her family, her friends, they're all gone. Now it all made sense to the Avatar. While it was true that Ben had come to terms with the past, he was still worried about his girlfriend's life. After all, unlike him and the hero, the girl likely had no place to go since her world was destroyed by the monster that's Nefarious. It was truly a sad thing to think about. But sadly there wasn't much Aang could do to help him, except as he then went over to him and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. I can't help her with that, Ben. Aang said softly. My people were wiped out by the Fire Nation a long time ago. It made me feel like I was alone, and the last of my people's culture. But thanks to Katara, Sokka and the others, I was able to get myself together and live on. So what I'm trying to say is this. When the time comes, be there for her. She will need you. You're the last person from her home, and the last person she would depend on. So don't worry too much about it. We may not be able to change what has happened in the past, but we can change what happens from here on out. And right now that involves stopping Nefarious from destroying more lives. You're right. Ben said in acknowledgement. He could feel himself feel better about the thought as he raised his head at Aang with a bit of determination on it. Besides, I have to make it through Nefarious to be there for her. Yup. Aang nodded. Well, here we are. Said Aang. Wan Shi Tong's library. True to his words, there were now before the library. However, its entire structure was upside on a large branch as seen in Ben's mind probe on Aang earlier. However, other than the placement, the Avatar could see then that the place was no different than how it was presented as a drawing when he and his friends met Professor Zay. His reason for this was due to the fact that last time he went into the building, he wasn't able to see the buildings outside since it was almost entirely buried in the sand last time. Hence, now that he did, he found it appealing even though it was upside down. So how should we enter? Aang asked. His question there wasn't to his own being, but to the hero next to him. He did this since he wasn't certain on their approach, especially with how it went the last time he and his friends went to the library. But just when he thought Ben would give something reasonable, he was soon proven wrong. Easy. We break the door. Ben stated. Why did I even ask? Aang asked with a slumped look. He regretted therefore asking the young hero, and so spoke to him. That wouldn't be a good idea, Ben. Aang insisted. Wan Shi Tong wouldn't like that. Ah-ha. Ben muttered. However, his mind wasn't on the avatar. It was obvious then, as he already had his hand over the Omnitrix as he went through various aliens in the Omnitrix before finally pulling back with a wide smirk on his face. Ha! There he is. Ben cheered. You're not listening to me, are you? Aang glared. Ha! Ben turned at him. At this point, Ben's mind was obviously absent-minded. It was clear by the way he looked at Aang before unintentionally slamming his hand down on the Omnitrix's faceplate. Hence, when the light engulfed him and died down, the hero was in a completely different alien form. Now, gone was the appearance of a 13-year-old human as his new form was revealed. It wasn't something spectacular, but something Avatar would later close his nose to as he stared at a bug alien with an insect-like body. The alien had 4 small pedunculated eyes with yellowish-orange in color as they were directed connected to the sides of his black head. As for the rest of its body, it wore a black and white color schemed cloth as its light green, fragile wings could be seen poking from the back. Its limbs were brown-greenish in color, with the Omnitrix symbol being on in the middle of his face. Stinkfly. What the heck? Ben shouted in shock. True to his words, the form he ended up having was Stinkfly. As the insect-like alien, Ben was gifted with a few things such as flight and the ability to shoot gooey things. But with the fact that he had gotten stronger and more powerful aliens that could fly and do more than Stinkfly could ever do, the hero ended up never using him ever since his first time in Danny Phantom's world. For a moment, Aang could only blink as he comprehended the alien before him. He could see that Ben obviously didn't intend for this alien, and as such didn't know what to say. But even if he could, he didn't have the chance to as he sniffed the air and caught the awful scent from Stinkfly. As a result, Aang took a step back and covered his nose while displaying a face of disgust. Ben, you stink. Yeah, tell me something I don't. Stinkfly yelled sarcastically. The thought about his recent transformation already felt annoying. He never intended for Stinkfly, not even once for a long time since his chase against Nefarious. But now that he yelled at Aang, he continued with an annoyed voice. I didn't even want this guy. Ben stated. I was going for Kid Impervious. Who? Ugh. Never mind. Aang was a bit confused by him. He could understand how bad-looking the alien could be, but not the one Ben wanted to be. Was this Kid Impervious something better to see? Aang wasn't sure. But even if he could, he didn't get the chance as Stinkfly suddenly flew over to him and grabbed his shoulders, much to the Avatar's shock. Hey. What are you doing? Aang questioned. We're going through this plan. Stinkfly stated. Aang was confused by what he meant. He wanted to ask what the hero meant by that, when suddenly he was lifted off from the ground in a rush without a warning. From there, TT became clear on what Ben had in mind as Aang's eyes flew wide when they approached quickly to the huge doors of the library. Ah! We won't make it through, Ben. Aang shouted. As much as Aang wanted to get into the place, he didn't like the resort Stinkfly was going for. The alien wasn't that strong looking despite how furiously determined he looked as he increased his speed. So for the Avatar, all he could do was shield himself with his staff as they finally made contact with the door only for them to end up flying right through it. Ha! It worked. Stinkfly grinned. Ha! Aang muttered in shock. Just a second ago, the Avatar thought he and Stinkfly would end up splattered on the large doors. After all, it was the most common thing to think at that situation. But now, there he and Stinkfly flew, inside the very building that's Wan Shirtong's library. We made it? Aang asked. His tone sounded mixed in confusion and surprise, especially as he then looked up to Stinkfly. Yup. I kind of knew it would work. Stinkfly replied. Kind of? The Avatar asked, raising his eyebrow. Right there, Aang wanted to ask what Ben meant by that. It was obvious to him that Ben didn't plan on them going through the door or actually making it into the building anyway. But even then, before he could actually bring it up, he moved his head forward and became wide-eyed. Ben, look out! He shouted. Huh. However, it was too late. Stinkfly and Aang ended up hitting the pillar face first before hitting the ground hard. The impact was bad to feel as both heroes winced and got on their knees, with Ben changing back to himself after being engulfed in a flash of green light. DMN, what hit me? Ben mumbled. From the looks of it, both heroes were alright from the fall. Their bodies obviously hurt by the way they struggled to get back on their feet before Aang turned his head at Ben with a scowl. We hit a pillar. Weren't you watching? Oh, sorry. Ben apologized. I was looking around when. Ben didn't get to finish his explanation. He could have as he intended to, but ended up getting interrupted by a sudden slow clap that echoed through the air, sounding around them. It came as a surprise to both heroes as they looked around before Aang caught the sight of a figure at the other end of the library, standing at an observant high level. Ben, look! Aang shouted and pointed. Indeed, Ben was right to follow his friend's direction. The two heroes had been caught off guard by the clapping until now both were staring at the source of it. So while one of them was surprised at the figure, the other snarled angrily at it. Nefarious! Ben yelled angrily. True to his words, it was the being known as Nefarious. It wasn't a fake projection or dreamlike version of him, it was the real him. Wait, that's Nefarious? Aang asked. His reaction then was a mix of mild shock and confusion as he turned to Ben upon asking. The teen, however, didn't reply, especially as Aang turned back at the monster and sent a straightforward look at it. You're right. That is him. He looks the same from my vision. Ha 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 ha. Nefarious laughed. So you had a vision of me, Avatar? Aang didn't answer him. He instead sent him a glaring look as he clutched his fists while tightening his grip on his staff. However, the supervillain didn't find him threatening as he stretched his hands out by his sides while displaying his sharp monstrous teeth. Tell me, Avatar, was I a god in your vision? Nefarious asked gleefully. Did I spread chaos and destruction all over your world unlike what I did to those pathetic humans? You're a monster. Aang yelled angrily. Those people did nothing wrong to you. They only wanted peace. Peace is for the weak. Nefarious said back. He didn't care for a second on what Aang said, especially as he placed his arms back to his sides. You want to know why I made them suffer, boy? He asked menacingly. It's because I needed to test my new power on them. They were the right guinea pigs to try it on. That power isn't yours, Nefarious. Ben yelled angrily this time. That power belongs to Rex Salazar. You stole it from him. Yes, I did. Nefarious admitted. He didn't feel guilt about it, though. And I shall steal this world's power, which will lead me one step to ultimate power. A power much greater than anything you and the Avatar have ever possessed in your lifetime or lifetimes in the case of the Avatar. Ben growled angrily in response. Nefarious was still as crazy as the last time he had last seen him. He destroyed worlds, ruined lives and only seemed concerned with ultimate power, which in itself was a mystery. Unfortunately, before he could think on it, Nefarious spoke again. However, I cannot let you children get in my way. He said proudly. I'm so close to ultimate power. So just to keep you occupied, I'll send my new SLV to deal with you. New SLV? Both Aang and Ben wondered. Nefarious smirked. Wan Shi Tong. Deal with these pests for your MSTR. Suddenly, the ground shook violently as a loud bird screech went through the air. The sound of it caused both Aang and Ben to cover their teeth, while gnashing their teeth from the hurt, as the source landed on the ground some feet away. And just when it seemed it couldn't do much than that, its large black wings flapped the air and sent a strong wave through the air. Fortunately, not much damage had been done. Ben and Aang were okay, as they removed their hands from their ears before looking a bit lost. The power the creature possessed was clearly outstanding to them, though not enough to stop them from looking forward at the creature. Wan Shi Tong. Aang gasped in shock. Indeed, before him was the spirit behind the creation of the library. But something wasn't right about him. He was in his fairest form, as indicated by his long neck, furious face, straightened feathers, long legs and large wings, while at the same time having red bloody eyes. Wait, that's the librarian of this place? Ben asked. Yeah. Aang answered and turned to Ben. Didn't we tell you that? Nope. Ben answered and shook his head. Just then, the unexpected happened to both heroes. The bird spirit immediately flew at them with a loud cry, with his wide mouth to grasp one of them. However, he failed to get them due to the heroes jumping out of the way, separate from each other, with the bird spirit between them. By its attack towards the heroes, Wan Shi Tong was now regarded as a threat. He was able to force Ben to jump to his right and fall on his stomach while Aang landed on his feet, though feeling a bit taken aback. And just before it could stand, Ben got on his feet and activated the Omnitrix. Okay. Now it's time to clip your wings. Ben shouted. Suddenly, without a single hesitation, the hero slammed his hand down on the Omnitrix faceplate and was engulfed by green light. It caused his body to grow large as his body became composed of crystals before finally dying down to reveal Ben in another alien form. He wore a black and white color scheme suit, with yellow eyes in place of his human eyes, while having the Omnitrix symbol on the left part of his chest. Diamond Head. He bellowed. As Diamond Head, Ben possessed various abilities in the form of the crystal he was made of. It wasn't made from any earthly material, though, but rather from the place the alien originated from. However, its source wasn't a thought for Diamond Head as he took a step back and watched the bird spirit rise back on his feet and turn at him with his furious face. He was about to realize another monstrous cry when suddenly it was hit by 2 fire blasts to the face. The fire blasts came as a surprise to the bird spirit as it caused him to cry out in pain. Diamond Head could see it from his position before turning his attention to the source of the blast, which turned out to be Aang. Wow! Nice shot, Aang! Diamond Head shouted to Aang. Thanks. Aang said back. However, this didn't mean the fight was over. In fact, it just begun as obvious when the bird turned and flapped his large wing at Aang, who couldn't act to avoid it in time. Hence, as a result, he was sent flying through the air before hitting the ground. Aang! Diamond Head shouted. He was surprised by what happened to the avatar until turning his attention back at Wan Shi Tong with an angry glare. Okay, now you've done it. He shouted. The alien hero decided to act then as he moved his hands forward, with his fist tightened. He made sure instantly his eyes were locked on the bird spirit before shooting small shards of diamond at the spirit's face. They did have an effect on the spirit as it caused him to step back before shielding his face with his left wing and using it against Diamond Head with a flap of it. However, this didn't work exactly as he wanted. Wan Shi Tong was able to send Diamond Head's shards back, but not the alien hero himself due to his hardened body. But that wasn't to say that Diamond Head didn't feel the force as he shielded his face with his left arm. Diamond Head had a second to acknowledge what just happened to him. He could feel the power of Wan Shi Tong's wing as it made him come to the conclusion that the bird spirit was no joke. But just as he put his arm down, he was grabbed by the spirit's large leg and stomped on the ground hard before being flung through the air and hitting one of the library's numerous shelves. The impact to the shelf wasn't so bad, though. It didn't hurt Diamond Head in the slightest, as obvious when he stood up almost immediately. But he did get to see Wang Shirtong just before him, ready to let out what may be another powerful bird screech. But that didn't happen due to the avatar. This was just as the spirit was about to blast when Aang suddenly flew over to him via his glider before swiftly turning it back to a staff in the air as he used to send a wind slash at the spirit's back. The attack hit the spirit's back as a result, as it cried out in pain before turning its attention to Aang, who landed on the ground, close to him. By the glare on Wang Shirtong's face, it was clear the ancient spirit didn't like the attack in the slightest bit. It was obvious when he sent his right wing at the avatar, only to then miss due to his target using air bending to make a big jump to stay behind him as he slashed his staff in the air and sent yet another air blast. Wang Shirtong had no time to react as he was hit with the blast. He cried out in pain yet again before being forced back and shielded his face with both wings as diamond shards nearly made contact with its face. Due to Aang's swift attack, Diamond Head took that chance to attack with advance. He rejoined with Aang while firing before watching as the avatar started shooting fire blasts from his fists while maintaining his own. They were both able to force the bird spirit back due to their firing attacks as it became clear that Wang Shirtong was being overwhelmed by it. Sadly, they couldn't continue their advance as the bird spirit spread out its wings, therefore letting out a big wing blast. The blast was strong and powerful as it caused the ground to shake and bookshelves to fall in its path. Clearly, Wang Shirtong didn't have his usual regard for his library as he ended up destroying a few of his properties by doing so, with the same almost for Aang and Diamond Head. Fortunately, Aang thought ahead as he stomped his right foot forward before sending both his hands close and upwards, thereby causing a big rock pillar to block the air attack. So just as the air attack came, it left almost an intense with the heroes still intact. Aang could see an opening at the end of it as he then punched the rock pillar at Wang Shirtong with full force. Clearly, the attack was meant to subdue the bird spirit as it reached the bird spirit, only to shatter into pieces with a swing of its wing. Fortunately, the advance didn't stop there. Diamond Head chose then to act as he punched his right hand into the ground, causing large diamond shards to shoot out of the ground and head over to Wang Shirtong's direction. It would have even hit the bird spirit, if not that it flapped its wings and began to take off to the air, only to then surprised by Diamond Head's next move. Over Ben's experience with his aliens, the hero had learnt new tricks to use. They may not have been used by the species his aliens represented, but they were effective as proven to what he did next. So before Wang Shirtong could take off into the air, Diamond Head shot out from the end of his crystal shards trail and grabbed the bird by the ankle. "Oh no you don't!" Diamond Head shouted. Wang Shirtong was surprised by the attack as he felt the grasp around his ankle. He was secured tightly by the alien hero as its weight forced his to the ground, with said hero landing safely on the ground. Then, just when his advance seemed to have ended, Diamond Head proved that wrong when he grabbed the bird's leg again, with two hands this time, and flung him to his far left. Wang Shirtong had no control over his body when this happened. His large body broke through a pillar and hit a couple of bookshelves before coming to a stop. It almost seemed like that attack was able to stop him, but Aang knew better. The Avatar has been in battles with spirits before, and so knew beating him that way wasn't enough. "Ben!" Aang shouted to the hero. Diamond Head responded. The alien hero turned to his left and saw the Avatar approach him. "Toss me over to Wang Shirtong," Aang stated instantly. However, Diamond Head didn't understand why. He looked at the Avatar for a second and looked back at the bird spirit to connect what that would do. Fortunately, it did, as evident by a smirk forming on his crystal face when he turned to Aang again. "You got it, bud," he shouted. Immediately, Diamond Head grabbed Aang by the back of his shirt before spinning his own body around. He made sure to build up momentum before tossing the Avatar towards Wang Shirtong's direction, just as the bird spirit was starting to get up. In Aang's moment in the air, he put it in good use. He had his staff forward as he spun it in a circle, creating more air power to strengthen him. Then, upon getting close, he dashed it forward and hit Wang Shirtong in the chest so strong he sent him flying through a column holding up a section of the upper levels, which then ended up falling on top of him. Aang would have followed with the bird spirit if he hadn't come to a stop. He did this by landing on his hands and feet, with his face forward, before standing up to observe the consequence of his action. So far, it appeared that Wang Shirtong was down to Aang, as he was rejoined by Diamond Head, who ran towards him. "Dude, you okay?" the alien hero asked. "Yeah, I'm fine," Aang answered. He didn't move his eyes off the place Wang Shirtong was hit as he continued. "I didn't want to do this," he admitted with a soft tone. "Wang Shirtong isn't bad when my friends and I met him. I sure wish I had the time to talk him out of it before he first attacked." "It wouldn't have mattered," Diamond Head stated. Knowing Nefarious, Wang Shirtong was under his strongest spell. It's Wang Shirtong, Ben," Aang corrected. "Whatever." Diamond Head shrugged. Aang turned to his head and shook his head. Clearly, Diamond Head didn't care a bit about the correction the Avatar made, not that it mattered. But just before he could say another thing, a rumbling sound could be heard from where Wang Shirtong was covered in rocks. The rumbling continued for a few seconds as the rocks covering the ancient spirit could be seen moving. The heroes thought about the possibility to the reason, but said nothing to each other as it became clear what was happening. Wang Shirtong was not only persistent, but very strong as obvious when he pushed the rocks off him and let out a monstrous bird cry. "He broke free," said Diamond Head, stating the obvious. "Yeah, but how?" Aang asked in surprise. Unlike his friend who was cool-headed, the Avatar was more in thought about the ancient spirit. "He shouldn't be able to stand." Sokka was able to know that's it. "Sokka? Sokka?" Diamond Head asked, confused. The alien hero knew the boy very well, but not why Aang mentioned him. The Avatar was always straightforward with himself until that moment as he turned to Ben with a look of haste. "I have a plan, but I need you to hold Wang Shirtong as much as you can," he said. "Can you do that?" "Sure. But be quick," Diamond Head replied. At this point, Wang Shirtong took the first step forward as he spread his wings apart. It didn't take a genius then to know he was ready for flight, when suddenly Diamond Head acted first to stop him. The alien hero knew better to keep the spirit on ground as he spread his arms forward and tightened his fists, which in turn made crystals to shoot out of the ground around the spirit's feet and hold it down. Meanwhile, Aang chose that moment to act as he flung his staff up and grabbed onto it when it became a glider. His glider has always helped him to fly even in tough situations like now, as at that moment he took off upwards into the air and began circling to build up momentum. It wasn't known why he was doing this, as it was obvious dashing against the ancient spirit again wouldn't work. However, until it was known, Diamond Head had to hold on. Unfortunately, the task wasn't as easy to think as Diamond Head once thought. The alien hero gritted his teeth and shut his eyes closed as he focused on holding Wang Shirtong down. The spirit was very persistent to get out of his grip as it flapped its wings widely with so much force that it was basically blowing anything down in its path. Diamond Head was lucky he wasn't in the path of anything, as he tried harder by spreading his now open hands to let the crystals at the bird's feet to grow past his ankle in order to have a better hold. At this point, it would appear that both Diamond Head and Wang Shirtong would be at this small battle of persistence between them. The alien hero was straining himself while the bird spirit continued with much force to break free. But just before that could happen, Aang came flying directly at the spirit's head. Throughout the time, Wang Shirtong had been focused on breaking free. He didn't have a thought on the Avatar, as observed by his persistence, as the Avatar's eyes flashed white before becoming normal when he then changed his glider back to a staff and held it up high to strike down on the spirit. "Ah!" Aang cried out loud. The momentum he built up, with the Avatar state to built, has led to this moment. Hence, when he struck down on the ancient spirit, a huge and powerful wind blast was sent directly on the bird's head. It knocked the bird down to the ground as its power spread all over the place and destroyed every bookshelf in sight. If it was a power similar to the one used by Wang Shitong, Diamond Head would have endured it. However, due to the strain and the power of the wind, the alien hero could do nothing but scream as he was sent flying through the air before coming to a stop as rolling on the ground. "Ow man, that hurt," Diamond Head said with a wince. It had only been a minute since Aang's attack caused destruction. It had leveled down everything except the pillars and created a dust cloud which was now clearing up. As for Diamond Head, the Omnitrix badge on his chest flashed green and engulfed him into a flash of green light that changed him back to being Ben. Note to self: ask before doing. Ben noted. So far, apart from being hit, the hero was fine. He still felt a mild pain at his back as he struggled to get back on his feet. The pain to him would have been a problem, but he was able to ignore it when he looked around him. Wow, Aang did all this. He awed. All around him, what used to be the central level of the library was gone from what it used to be. It made the hero wonder what may have been destroyed for a moment before he heard something in the air. It sounded somewhat familiar to the hero, as it made him look up and see Aang heading towards him. The Avatar was once again flying by his glider as he drew close to Ben. He could see from his position that the teen was alright as he then landed on the ground and twirled his glider back to a staff. Sorry about that. I should have warned you." Aang apologized. "Oh, that's okay," Ben said with assurance. "At least we took down Mong Shirtu. It's Wan Shirtong. Again, whatever." Aang rolled his eyes in response. He was sure by now that Ben didn't care about the spirit's name at all. However, just before he could speak again, Ben yelped and took a step back. "Ah! A skull!" he shouted. "A skull?" Aang asked, confused. Upon hearing of a skull, he saw Ben point at the ground by his right. It wasn't something bad, but it was something that intrigued him as he squat down and noticed some clothes spread next to the skull. "Professor Zay," Aang muttered. "Wait, you know who that is?" Ben asked. Aang nodded and stood back to his feet before turning to Ben. "Yes, he's the professor we mentioned before. I guess he got what he wanted." "Yeah, and what's that?" "To stay here forever." Aang didn't seem too thoughtful of the matter with the professor, though. Sure, he knew the guy, but other than knowing the man got what he wanted was enough for the Avatar. As a result, he walked forward and shook his staff to become a glider while Ben looked away from the skull and muttered. "Yeah, by killing himself." Just then, Ben went over to Aang and activated the Omnitrix. He scrolled through the alien playlist in the Omnitrix before coming across one that interested him. As such, when he slammed his hand down on the faceplate, he was engulfed by a flash of green light before it died down to reveal yet another alien form. This alien didn't change so much from his human appearance. In fact, the teen still retained it, though with the exception of his clothes, as he flew off with Aang to where Nefarious was last seen. The clothes he wore was mainly a green suit, which along with it had a green belt around his waist, black boots and a black cape which was long enough to reach his feet. He also had an Omnitrix insignia on his chest, as the actual badge was at the middle of his belt. So far, both heroes were determined to find the supervillain before his plan could be happen. They went to the same floor/level they last saw him and from there came to a stop as all they could see was just a large space filled with bookshelves containing books. Ah, great. Where could he be now? Aang asked. Ben uttered with a thought. He understood the situation they were in as he stood there until a thought came to him. It didn't mean he said anything, though, as it became clear as he quietly stepped forward and suddenly looked around them. Ben. Aang called to the boy. When the teen hero had stepped forward, his manner was odd. He had a straight look as he looked around like he was searching for something on his own without Aang. But once the Avatar spoke, the teen looked back at him with a hard blink of his eyes and said firmly. "I've found him." "Wow, you have?" Aang asked, surprised. How? This alien I'm using. Ben answered and turned to the other teen. I call him Kid Impervious. I can't tell you what he can do now, we have to go now. The word said by the teen hero came clearly. It made Aang to understand much without asking as he nodded before shifting his glider back to a staff. Then, with Ben running off in remarkable speed, Aang followed right behind him in close speed. As Kid Impervious, Ben had the similar power of Supergirl. This meant that he had super speed, super strength, super endurance, and any other thing the teenage superheroine could do since he obtained it when he was in the Teen Titans universe. So before approaching Nefarious's location, Aang was able to make it close to Kid Impervious. He didn't get to be by his side, but he was close behind to talk with the alien hero. And from the places they were passing, the Avatar was finding it all too familiar. Ben, I think I know this direction. Aang said. Really? Ben asked and looked back. Yeah, and I think I know where we're heading. There was no denying it now that Nefarious may be in a specific room the Avatar was familiar with. However, the question of why he needed it was a mystery to the young airbender as he and the other hero continued running. It didn't make much sense to him there and then until they arrived at a familiar entrance where they came to a stop in a familiar big room. I knew it. Aang muttered. He was right to say those words once his eyes lay on their front. They were in the planetarium he and his friends had once gone into after being led by one of Wan Shirtong's foxes known as Knowledge Seekers. Back then, they were able to find out the secret weakness to the Fire Nation that they later tried to use only to fail, and now that the Avatar could see it again, he was then shocked to find the state of it. One time, while getting to a specific date, Sokka had set the large dial which was placed in the middle of the room to night. That time, the night setting was a beauty as it showed constellation stars and the moon, as they reflected on everyone's body. Sadly, this wasn't the state of it now despite the setting being it. So upon arriving, both the Avatar and Kid Impervious watched as Nefarious stood before the large dial, blocking their view of it. The dial was known to change the scenery of the planetarium as seen by its current night setting, which now was having an abnormal happening. The symbols on it that indicated the season were shining brightly as lightning shot out rampantly on the walls and the ground. Some of it, though, was at the nightly stars, as they could be seen bringing the divided sides that made up the yin and yang symbol closer to unite with one another. Ha ha ha. Nefarious laughed manically. He still had his back at the heroes as he sensed the heroes' presence. I knew Wan Shirtong wouldn't be able to hold you both for long, so it never mattered even if he succeeded. And now I shall cross to the convergence of this world and rip the fabric of its reality. No. We won't let you. Aang rebuked angrily. Nefarious's intention was dangerous, as well as risky. Though Aang didn't understand so much about it, he knew then that he and Kid Impervious have to stop the supervillain. Hence, he made a move forward to attack when he suddenly obstructed by 11 of the Knowledge Seekers. You won't stop me, Avatar. Nefarious laughed. This time he tilted his head to the heroes and showed his evil grin. Keep the heroes busy for a few seconds longer. He ordered the Knowledge Seekers. Under his control, the Knowledge Seekers had their loyalty only to Nefarious. The heroes could see it by their red eyes and snarling teeth as each one of them stood ready to fend off the heroes. But before they could make a move, Kid Impervious swiftly moved before Aang in light speed and let out a gush of air from his mouth that sent the spirit animals hitting the ground unconscious. Suddenly, the yin and yang symbol connected with each other in front of Nefarious and released a white-bluish straight at the supervillain's direction and formed a circular portal right above the huge dial. Ha! Yes! Nefarious cheered. From the looks of it, the supervillain had achieved what he intended. The portal would take him to the place he wanted and bring him another step closer to the ultimate power he seeks. But before he could go, he sensed the heroes coming for him, and so turned back swiftly just in time to grab the Avatar's whole body in his large right hand before throwing him successfully at an approaching Kid Impervious, sending both of them to the ground. Once again, Tennyson, you have lost. Nefarious said with a satisfied tone. At this moment, Aang was on top of Kid Impervious. The two heroes had clearly not anticipated the supervillain's reflex, hence the evildoer was now free to use the dial as a walking step and walk into the portal. However, just before his whole body went in, Aang swiftly got back on his feet, with a focused face and his knees bent, and used his air bending to jump straight into the portal just in time as it closed behind him. Oh no! Aang! Kid Impervious gasped. Just as Aang had got off, the hero was able to raise himself just in time to see the avatar do the unthinkable. He saw his entire body go through the portal before it closed, before then standing up on his face with a look of his shock on his face. Before meeting Ben, Aang never would have thought he would be in an all too familiar dimension. It was odd really when he thought about it. He had jumped right into a portal to stop Nefarious from doing whatever his aim, until now he found the task wasn't so easy. In fact, it was hard. So upon jumping up into the air, Aang narrowly avoided being hit by 3 ecto-orbs. He had seen the monster, Nefarious, shoot them from his mouth, directly at his way, before then dodging them in time as they stuck to the ground in their round shape. However, unknown to the avatar, these blasts were meant to miss him. Their purpose wasn't to hit him, but instead to start ticking like a bomb upon making contact to the ground. And since the latter happened while Aang was in the air, the boy had no idea about the sounds until they exploded and hit him with enough power. Fortunately, the avatar was able to do a flip and land on the ground, with his feet dragging on the ground surface. Nefarious is tough. Aang thought to himself. I've been fighting him for a while now and he doesn't seem to weigh down. That is correct, Avatar. Nefarious suddenly said. Huh? Aang expressed in shock. The look on the boy's face was disbelief as he stood fully up. He had only stated what he thought in his mind before then seeing Nefarious walking towards him with a grin on his face. I can hear your thoughts, Avatar. Nefarious stated, much to the Avatar's thought. It doesn't matter how you try, because in the end, I will win this fight and conquer your world. Not if I have anything to do about that. Aang said back determinedly. Ha ha ha, we'll see. Suddenly, right before Aang's eyes, the villain ran straight at him. The speed he went was remarkable, as the distance between him and the monster was instantly shortened before Aang could react. Fortunately, the teen was able to catch sight of the supervillain at the last second before making a huge jump backwards. However, this didn't go completely well as Nefarious was able to catch up to him before his feet could touch the ground and land a punch directly at his face, sending him crashing through the surface of the ground. Ha 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 ha. Nefarious laughed evilly. From the looks of it, the Avatar had been affected by the blow. His body hadn't been prepared for such a strong hit, especially as he never thought Nefarious's blows could be any bad. But just a second after the supervillain's evil laugh, Aang was able to get back on his feet before then getting into one of the few known earthbending stance. Just then, before Nefarious's line of sight, Aang went into action. He sent his right foot forward, followed by striking the end of his foot against the ground, with such force that a large trail of rocks erupted from Aang's stance and headed to Nefarious. The supervillain, however, didn't seem worried about the Avatar at all. In fact, he stayed in place and let the attack approach him before then shooting beams from his eyes that shattered the whole thing, creating a dust cloud. However, unknown to Nefarious, the attack was a diversion. Aang had expected the monster to do something like that since their fight had been one-sided from the start. And now that Aang had gotten him to act, he made a huge jump at him, courtesy of his air bending, and came through the dust cloud with a spin and his staff in hand. Before the supervillain knew what to do, Aang hit him with such force of air from his staff that he was forced back, with his huge feet dragging through the earth's surface. From the looks of it, Aang had the upper hand now that he had caught the supervillain off guard. He was able to charge at him with his air-bending speed before then making a leap at the supervillain, ready to use another blow. However, this time, Nefarious was able to catch sight of him before attempting to swat him with his large hand in an attempt to hit him. But it turned out he didn't entirely succeed. It turned out then that Aang's quick reflex had come to his aid, as it allowed him to hang on to the supervillain's arm by clinging on to his small thorns. His new position kept him from being flung away, as with his determination he stayed in place until Nefarious stopped moving. Then once that happened, he ran up the monster's huge arm and headed straight for his head, while at the same time preparing to strike. But before he got to that, Aang prepared himself. He shook his staff so the bottom fin of the staff opened before then making a jump for Nefarious's face, where he swiftly twirled the staff to gather powerful air power and send it for the supervillain's body. The close impact got Nefarious's as Aang intended, as it sent him flying a few feet and hitting the ground on his back. However, the fight was far from over. Nefarious was able to get back on his feet soon after, while Aang landed on the ground, perfectly on his feet. The teen only had a few seconds after to react as Nefarious snarled angrily before shooting 4 red beams from his eyes, with precise accuracy. Fortunately, Aang was able to act fast upon seeing it. He made a huge sideways jump, before, upon making contact with the ground, running straight at Nefarious in full speed, by the aid of his air bending. His speed was so remarkable that a gush of dust was behind him as he ran to the best of his abilities while keeping watch of Nefarious's next move. Nefarious was no foe to underestimate, as he'd proven that in the past. He could see the speed Aang was rushing towards him, and so didn't seem so intimidated by it in the slightest. It did, however, get him to shoot beams after beams from his eyes, where each shot the Avatar dodged caused it to hit the ground and exploded. At the same time, Aang could feel how dangerously the ground shook. He knew the blasts he dodged were very devastating, as even then he could see particles of dusts and rocks past him while he ran. He had only closed a bit of the gap, and already Nefarious was close to getting him. But then a thought came to Aang while he closed the distance. Where were they exactly? Ever getting through that battle, Aang and Nefarious had been at each other. The Avatar knew in a sense that they were still in the spirit world, though their location was something unknown to him. In the spirit world, there's an energy current only he, the Avatar, and inhabitants of said world could feel. But even though he doesn't visit the spirit world so often, there was a level of energy he recognized from it. However, their location for the time being was different. It had a high sense of spiritual energy than other places Aang had visited in the spirit world. And though he was certain he hadn't visited the place before, he couldn't help but find it all too familiar. The skies were surprisingly odd in a doodle-like formation, while their current battlefield seemed to be some kind of terrain with huge spiky rocks around. Unfortunately, the time to figure out his surroundings was very limited. If Aang stopped for a second, like he did upon entering the portal, he would be struck again by the supervillain. It also didn't help that Nefarious barely gave him time to speak or even contemplate on familiar sensation he felt. So while Aang wanted so much to figure things out, his attention was on Nefarious. He was able to avoid a few other beams from Nefarious before coming to a stop and sending the end of his foot into the ground, where he then caused a line of cracks to head towards Nefarious's right leg, which in turn caused big chunk of rock to come out from below. Aang's move there came as a surprise as it affected the supervillain. It caused the supervillain to stumble back just to save his footing and at the same time doing what Aang intended for him to do. So even if he could figure it out, it was already too late once Aang ran forward with a gush of air from his feet and stomped his right leg on the ground. This was then followed with his right arm sent sideways forward, which in turn caused a wave of huge rocks to shoot out from the ground and hit the supervillain's other leg, causing him to lose his footing. But that didn't mean Aang was done with Nefarious. He had seen how effective his attack had been on the supervillain, when suddenly he ran underneath the supervillain with incredible speed before he could hit the ground. Then, with the amount of air he gathered from his run, he spun his body and created a mini tornado around him before then raising his staff above his head and spinning it rapidly. Now at this point, there wasn't anything Nefarious could do to stop Aang. The Avatar spun his staff with much effort and power that he launched the monster high up in the air, with uncertainty on how far he sent him. He did look up once he did the act, as even then he couldn't help but see how far the supervillain was sent away. But then when he did, he only got the chance to see Nefarious's body, in the form of a small dot, coming right to the ground directly for him. Fortunately, the avatar was wise enough not to stand in one place. He took the chance he had to run as far as he could before coming to a stop a few meters away, where he then felt the ground shake. Apparently, that shake, not surprising, was from Nefarious, who now lay in a crater about his size on his front side. However, unknown to Aang, this action caught the interest of a very evil entity. He couldn't do anything from his position, as he was imprisoned in a tree by a foe he once faced long ago. But not surprising, this foe had a very good relation with the Avatar himself. But while this foe watched from his prison, Aang didn't seem to notice his presence yet. He was just there, standing on his own, when a small smile of accomplishment came across his face before he blew his head in relief. "I guess that's over," he muttered. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 7. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and Man of Cartoons on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.